Hello friends, I'm very happy you're back again. I hope you're all doing well, taking good care of yourselves and living a happy life. Tonight we're going deep into the frozen wilderness of Alaska for 4 terrifying park ranger horror stories. Stories about isolation, strange noises in the snow, and things that should never be seen in the forests at night. Before we begin, subscribe and help me reach 100 subscribers. Also, comment below and tell me where you're watching from. And if you have any scary stories about forests or park rangers, leave them in the comments. All right, let's begin. I'm a seasonal caretaker at a national park in Alaska. I won't say which one, because I still value my job and I've been warned by my employers to keep my mouth shut about anything unusual I've seen during my time here. That being said, there are some very strange things that I've seen over the last 3 years I've held this position, and I figured I'd share some with you. You may not even be aware of what a seasonal caretaker is, and that's completely understandable. Generally, it's not that exciting, if I'm being honest. I start my season when the park is closed for the winter, and it's my responsibility to make sure that the various cabins and public buildings are maintained and the snow is kept cleared from their roofs to prevent any damage, that sort of thing. It's a lonely job, and if you're a people person, it's probably not for you. It takes a bit of an odd duck to willingly put themselves into exile for 3 months at a time, knowing that there's no way out until the snow begins to melt, and the plows can start clearing some of the access roads that lead out to my cabin. I do have a snowmobile that I can use to take the 3-hour trip to the nearest ranger station if I need to, but it's not like a quick trip to the corner store. It's just fine for me, though. I've always been a bit of a loner, and I have Max, my Jack Russell Terrier, to keep me company. The job isn't very demanding. I typically only spend a few days each week tending to my responsibilities, and the rest of the time is mine to do with as I please. A few years ago, I took up nature photography as a hobby to pass the time and have even had a few of my pictures published by an organization you'd recognize by name. I have framed copies of those magazines hanging on the wall behind me right now. As a matter of fact, a lot of people come through this park during the more temperate months. It's probably one of the most popular places for outdoorsy folks to come explore in this region of Alaska. In the winter months, however, it's completely deserted except for a few lonely ranger stations and the like. I'll go for weeks at a time without seeing a soul, and the only person I speak with any regularity is my ranger buddy. We'll call him Rick, who I check in with a few times a week on the radio. Aside from that, it's just me and Max. I'm not sure how best to go about telling you about some of the things I've seen up here in the dark, frozen days of winter, so I'll just dive right in and tell you about the shades. At least, that's what I call them when I'm talking to myself. I have no idea what they really are, but when the winter storms are blowing strong against my shuttered cabin windows, and the visibility in the snow and dim light are next to nothing, you'll see them. It's almost like looking at someone moving behind a pane of frosted glass, all indistinct and shadowy. At first, I just thought my mind was playing tricks on me, finding patterns in the chaotic static of all that falling snow, but then I started hearing them as well. Like murmurings, just loud enough to hear over the howl of the wind, but too quiet to recognize them as any sort of intelligent speech. It's enough to set you on edge, I can tell you that much. They tend to only show up during a heavy snowstorm, and the fiercer the storm, the closer they'll come to the cabin. It's gotten to the point where I'll make sure I've locked my doors and windows long before nightfall if I know there is a storm coming. One time, during an especially nasty blizzard, I could actually hear them moving all around my cabin, like some sort of nightmare parade. That night was bad. At one point, I actually saw and heard the doorknob on my front door turning, all slow and deliberate, accompanied by what sounded like soft scratching at the wooden surface. The worst of it, and I'll swear on a stack of Bibles that it's the truth, was the faint whispering voice that kept calling my name just on the other side of the door. That went on for an hour or more, and even now if I close my eyes I can still hear that cold, hollow voice. It's what I would imagine a person would sound like if their soul were ripped from their body. I suppose I'm being a little overly dramatic, but it's the only way I can describe it. Alive, but also lifeless. I don't know a better way to explain it. No reason to dwell on it, I guess. I will say that I'm not sure what would have happened if I hadn't remembered to throw the deadbolt that night, but I'm not interested in finding out. Just thinking about it makes me anxious. I mentioned it to Rick the next day after the storm had quieted, when I could get a radio signal out. I expected him to laugh at me for letting myself get all spooked by the dark, but he didn't. He very calmly and firmly told me that it was better not to talk about them at all, and to just make sure I kept myself locked up nice and tight when the heavy snowstorms came. I tried to prod him for more information, but he just refused to elaborate any further. The only thing he would add was that not everything sleeps when winter comes on up here. I have to admit he creeped me out more than a little with that zinger. He definitely knows something about them, and I'm going to try to pin him down one day and get more information. The next thing on the list is the car graveyard. I shit you not. If you explore far enough off the beaten trail out here, chances are pretty good you'll find one, a car or truck, just inexplicably deposited in the middle of backwater Alaska. Like that makes any sense at all. The first one I ever saw was an early 2000s BMW coupe, looking like it was just off the showroom floor. Except for the fact that half of it was embedded in an old spruce that had probably stood there since before cars even existed. It almost looked like the tree had grown around the car. Or maybe the car had been interposed into the tree. I don't know how it's possible, I just know that it was there. I've seen a few of them during my time here. Sometimes trapped in the trees like that BMW, and sometimes just sitting in the middle of an open space of ground. Every one of them looked like they were fresh off the road, and none of them had any logical way they could have gotten out there, even without the whole de-stuck in the trees part. The most unnerving thing about the cars, though, is the clothing. I've stopped looking and just tend to avoid going anywhere near one if I see it. But the first time I saw one, my curiosity led me to check it out. I tried to open the doors, but they were all locked. When I looked in through the windows, though, I saw the damnedest thing. In the front seats, it looked like someone had laid out clothes, pants, shirts, socks, shoes, the whole deal, and strapped the seatbelts around them. It was like the people in the car had just vanished in mid-drive, leaving their clothes behind just the way they'd been wearing them. Eerie is one word for it, but if I'm being honest, it scared the shit out of me. The other thing about the cars is that you won't find the same one twice. When I saw that first BMW, I came back out the next day with my camera to take a picture of it, but it wasn't there anymore. I thought I'd simply forgotten where it was, or that I'd gotten turned around. But when I saw my boot prints in the snow from the day before, I knew I was in the right spot. I tried to report this to the Rangers as well, but Rick told me they wouldn't even send anyone out to investigate them anymore. By the time anyone got there, they'd be gone. Apparently, reports of this sort of thing have been coming in periodically over the last 20 or 30 years, and nobody knows anything about them. He did tell me that one of the Rangers had found one once, a school bus from Texas, if you can believe that. In each of the rows of seats were piles of empty clothes, with the exception of the driver. The Ranger that found it said that the driver was sort of there, but not really, almost like a blurry hologram frozen in time. He said that the driver, an elderly man, looked like he was frozen in some terrified scream, all wide-eyed and gaping mouth. The Ranger tried to get into the bus using the rear emergency door, but when he got the door open, a loud buzzing sound filled his ears, and a high-frequency vibration ran through his body like an electric shock. He said the closer he got, the more intense the sound and sensation became. Before he could even take a step inside the bus, it grew so strong that he thought he was going to pass out. The best he could describe it was like when you have two strong opposing magnets that you're trying to push together. The more you push, the stronger the resistance becomes. He said it was almost like the universe was somehow keeping him out of that bus, like he didn't belong in it. He stumbled away from it and spent the next day in bed, sicker than a dog. When he came back out a few days later with some other Rangers, the bus was gone. I can't really speak for the buzzing and vibrating personally. I just know that I avoid them whenever I see them. They're just not right. The last thing I'll tell you about today is the bridge. About a mile or so away from my cabin along a maintained footpath, there's a rope bridge that crosses a deep ravine. To the side of it, there's a bit of rock jutting out that's used as a kind of observation point. You know what I mean. Where hikers will stop and take selfies along their trek to post to Facebook or Twitter or whatever. The Parks Department even went through the trouble of installing handrails along the edge of it to prevent anyone from falling to their death. Of course, there aren't any hikers here during the winter season. The park is technically closed and all roads leading into the area are blocked by chains to prevent anyone from driving in and getting into trouble with no possibility of rescue. I hike down that path probably once a week, looking for new photo opportunities to occupy my time. It's a beautiful walk and the whole landscape seems so crisp and fresh without people tromping all around it. I've gotten some incredible shots of the bridge, but I don't dare step out onto it when it's this cold, though. The boards are constantly frozen and slick with ice. I'm pretty sure it wouldn't take much of a misstep to fall on my ass and slide out from under the waist-high rope handholds. I'd be falling 200 feet to the rocks below before I even realized what was happening. Here's the weird part, though. Invariably, when I reach that bridge, I'll find multiple sets of footprints leading up to the rocky outcropping, but none of them leading away from it. They'll come from all different directions, some from the path and others straight out of the trees, but they all seem to stop at the edge of the ravine. They're various sizes and stride lengths, some of which are very small, and others are so large they have to have been made by some massive hulk of a person. The first time I saw them, I was afraid that some trespassers had gotten too close to the edge and fallen over. But when I spent the better part of a day making my way carefully to the floor of the ravine, I couldn't find any sign that anyone had been there besides me. I'll be the first to admit that I'm no tracker, but even I can tell when footprints in fresh snow lead up to a place and don't return. I've walked out onto that outcropping myself once to see if I could figure out where all these people had gone. Maybe there was a hidden path that I wasn't seeing. But the moment my foot touched that stone, my head began to throb like I was suffering from the worst hangover I'd ever had. When I staggered back from it, the pain disappeared like it had never been there, and I was left with a pretty insistent nosebleed for the rest of the afternoon as my only souvenir. I didn't try again. Max won't even go anywhere near it. He'll start whining as soon as we start approaching that part of the trail. Mind you, this is a dog that I've had to, on multiple occasions, wrestle inside the cabin because he was so incensed that a pack of wolves dared wander too close to his territory. For all of his small stature, he doesn't seem to have the self-preservation gene that tells him when he should be afraid of something. But not the overlook, though. That's a different story altogether. Even Max has his limits, I guess. I have more stories, but I'm getting a little tired and it's about time for me to get some sleep. Tomorrow I need to head out to the cabins by the frozen lake and make sure their roofs are clear. I'll write more later. Next time I'll tell you about the dead bears. I show a little context before I begin. I live in a town on the Alaskan coast that I'll avoid naming, due to how small the community is. I'm 23 years old and I share a house with my grandpa. The first time I ever set eyes on the place was 7 years ago, when my parents sent me to summer up here with Grandpa, and the town just sort of got a hold of me. I came back every summer after that and then moved here to get a job once I completed high school. The town itself is tiny, really in the middle of nowhere. We're nestled in between a set of mountains and a strait that leads out into the freezing ocean. Most of our town's business revolves around fishermen who stop in the strait for food, supplies, or a place to sleep, though we do have some local fishermen as well. To put into perspective how compact this place really is, there are no real streets per se. All the main buildings and most of the housing are situated along a boardwalk. It doesn't really matter since there are no roads that lead here. You get here by boat or float plane. Behind us are hundreds of miles of wilderness and you'd have to travel at least 50 miles up or down the coast to find another town. Or at least I'm pretty sure. We've got a community center that also acts as a police station, a restaurant, a bar with an inn on top of it, a school, library, a hardware store, and a few other random businesses. Most of these are lined up in the center of the boardwalk, while traveling further in either direction leads to houses. We've actually got a pretty impressive harbor, and there's usually at least 16 boats tied up down on the docks. Anyway, I'm sure you get the picture. Anyway, a couple things that have happened up here have been a few steps back from normal. I'm sure you guys will get a kick out of them. Me and my buddies sure do. The first one isn't really all that scary, just sort of weird and kind of funny. To put it bluntly, the Krat is the affectionate name given to something that lives in the backwoods behind our town. Nobody I know of has ever claimed to have seen it besides drunkards and people fooling around. But every night around dusk, if the boardwalk is quiet, you can hear it screaming. It's almost always distant and faint, but it's one of the weirdest goddamn sounds I've ever heard. The best way to describe it really is just a blend of a crow cawing and a cat screeching. Hence the name the Krat, Crowcat, haha. Despite how weird it is, it's almost become something of a town mascot, like our own Loch Ness monster. You can even buy t-shirts with pictures of a cat-headed crow in our community center. The Krat freaked me out the first summer I spent here, but now I don't even think about it. My grandpa's never really said much about it aside from jokes, and I haven't thought to ask him, since he's been living in this town for ages. This next thing isn't funny or weird. It happened during the winter after my first summer spent up here. And it's become sort of a tragedy or horror story. Thankfully, I wasn't around when it went down because at that point I was only spending my summers in town. It was early December when one of the women in the town went missing, which in a town of around 120 people doesn't go unnoticed. She was the wife of one of the town fishermen. He'd met her during a stop in Sitka. After a short romance, they were married and he brought her up to live with him here. After the first year, she'd found her footing in the community, so she was a pretty well-liked figure. I'd seen her a couple times running around, though we'd never really connected. After several days of her being totally absent, a couple of her friends started getting worried. They requested that the local police, all two of them, check in to make sure she was all right. Their house wasn't on the main boardwalk, but instead accessible via a trail that branched off a short ways into the woods. When our two police guys approached the couple's house and knocked on the door, they received no response. Before they could really formulate a plan, there was a loud bang, someone taking a shot at them while peeking through the curtains of one of the upstairs windows. Luckily, neither of them were hit and they quickly found cover, one of the two running to get help from the town. By the time he'd returned with a group of capable and armed men, there had been another gunshot from inside the house. The group forced their way in, though most knew what to expect. Inside was the corpse of the fisherman. He'd blown his brains out kneeling at the upstairs bedroom window. They described his body as slumping down to rest between the toilet and the sink, staring at the ceiling. It didn't take long for them to uncover the woman's body after that. It was stuffed into the corner of their attic, hurriedly covered in boxes like something a child was trying to hide from his parents. Apparently, they found her journal, and it seemed she hadn't been as content as most assumed. There were plenty of entries describing how she desperately wanted to be back in a real town, a real city. She described how she felt like she was on the wild's back porch and didn't belong there. After fruitless nights of begging her husband to move somewhere less rural, she made up her mind to finally leave by herself and abandon him. What happened after that was easy to piece together. This story freaked me the fuck out when I first heard it, but now that I'm older, it bothers me less. This last one was really strange. Out of everything, I'd have to say it sticks with me in a special way. It was during my third summer staying in town. I was shooting the shit the only real buddy I had, who we'll call Derek. It's broad daylight and we're just running around town when we hear yelling from behind the bar. We rush back over there to check it out, and there's a group of guys standing around another dude. I recognized everyone but the guy in the middle as local, who was freaking out. His clothes were all torn up and he looked dirty, and not just hard work dirty, but like caked with dirt. We walked up to one of the men trying to calm him down, guy who owned the hardware store and knew my grandpa, to ask what was up. Apparently this guy had just run out of the fucking woods, where there wasn't anything but the wild for miles, and started slamming himself against the back door of the bar. Everyone inside had seen his mad dash through the window and got up when he started pounding on the door. Now he was just twitching and grumbling like a drug addict. We were all standing around him, kinda unsure of what to do, when suddenly the guy's face just goes totally still. I mean, from mumbling psycho to 100% composed, just like that. We all kinda gape as his eyes slowly glance over each of us and he speaks, his voice low and collected. There's something in the woods that walks on its hair. We kinda just stood there in shock, staring, and just like that he went right back to tweaking the fuck out. We look at each other, sort of unsure how to deal with it. We got the cops involved and eventually the consensus was just to move him into the library. We didn't really have a hospital or prison until we could put him on a boat to Anchorage or Sitka where he could get some help. He seemed harmless even though he was creepy, and didn't resist when we moved him. We planned to check on boats that came in the next day. We left my buddy from the hardware store looking after him overnight. His shop was right next to the library and he didn't mind staying in there and keeping an eye out. The next morning he was gone. The hardware store guy had fallen asleep around 3 in the morning, and during that time this crazy motherfucker smashed through the library's sliding glass door even though it was totally unlocked, and took off. The hardware guy apologized and our deputy muttered something about replacing the glass, but there was really nothing else to be said. Nobody really felt like talking about it, and the hardware guy looked especially pale. I don't blame him. I wouldn't want to be asleep with that guy in the building besides me either. I have lived here in Alaska all my life. It's a beautiful land and many of the people here wouldn't trade it for anywhere else in the world. That being said, there's a lot of things that don't get shared with the outside world very much. Indeed, there are many, many things that happen in the long, Dark winter months that most people just won't talk about. But it does result in our children being taught seemingly innocuous and obvious things, like stay away from holes on the ice or never walk alone at night. Whenever you hear old-timers discussing what it takes to become a sourdough, there's always one unspoken rule that everyone silently agrees to. You aren't a true sourdough, a true Alaskan until you've had what is just referred to as an experience. There are no set parameters, and everyone's is different, but it changes you, and you're more likely to know when you're about to have another. The story I want to tell, however, isn't my first experience. That story would be too much for me to try to put words to at the time I write this. Nor does this story happen in the dark of winter, but on a bright, hot, clear, summer day, with two other witnesses that to this day still don't or won't believe me. The thing that bothers me most about this story, though what makes it truly unique amongst my friends that will share their stories, is that it doesn't even involve an Alaskan spirit or monster, but one from another country. Before I begin, some setup and backstory. There are two longtime friends that I go fishing on the Kenai River with, near the towns of Kenai and Soldotna. The Kenai is a gorgeous glacial-fed river with some of the best sport fishing in the world. Please don't let my story keep you from visiting. As you'll see by the end of the story, it's safe now. Well, safer. I will call these friends D and B to protect their identities. When this experience happened in the end of June or beginning of July 2011, we were all nearing 30 years old. Dee's mother has run a fishing guide and lodge service on the river for years. They have at least 2 different locations that have a lodge, and at least 2 or 3 more riverfront property pieces they use as private docks for their service. So the 3 of us have a pretty sweet deal to get access to a nice private stretch of river that Dee's mother didn't use as often. Keep it clean, be respectful, and if there's clients there, stay out of the water unless needed. It beats the hell out of shoulder-to-shoulder combat fishing at public access areas, and the rules are easy to deal with. It should also be noted that it's my belief to this day that there were 2 things that saved me that day. Some college-level Japanese studies classes I had actually taken in high school, and the fact my mother stuck some vegetables in my fishing backpack. You'll see. So with that, here is my most bothersome, keeps-me-up-at-night Alaskan experience. I had spent an early Saturday morning help my mother in her garden, on the opposite side of town from my home. Since I planned on going fishing later in the day anyways, my gear and pack were already in my truck. Truthfully, during this time of year, my rod, chest waders, and everything I need to spend the day on the river are always in my truck. It was sockeye, red salmon season, and I always fill my freezer with this delicious red fish. I had just finished bringing a large basket of early harvest cucumbers inside. My mother's plants had gone crazy with the great weather we'd had, and she had cucumbers and pickles coming out of her ears already. My cell phone went off, and I knew by the ringtone that it was my D, so I answered, "Killin' any sockeye yet?" "Getting ready to," was his response. "B and I are at our spot already." He paused. "But there's someone here already." I gave a shout from the dock, and he replied in what I think is Japanese. "Do you remember anything from his school?" This was what should have been my first warning about the day. I just shrugged. I guess I could try. "Did you call your mom?" "Is he one of hers?" He paused. Something was up. "No, I know for a fact she doesn't have anyone in from Japan until the end of next week. B and I are definitely sure he's not one of hers. And I don't want Mom calling the troopers on some poor guy that, from the sounds of it, just couldn't read the private signs." Fair enough. But it still felt like he was leaving something out. My desire to be at the river overcame my sense of judgment. I ignored the tingle in my brain that said an experience was around the corner. "All right, I'm leaving my ma's now. Should be there in about 15. "We'll be here." I said goodbye to my mom, who hugged me and said, "I love you. Be careful. And I put some veggies in your pack for my grandbabies." It was more like 20 minutes for me to get there. But when I pulled up next to Dee's old beater Suburban, I noticed the 2 of them were geared up but obviously still hadn't gotten in the water. As I got out of my truck, I could tell they were bothered by something. A few minutes later, my gear was on. I gave a hello and asked why they hadn't started without me. They looked at each other. "Well, let's get down there and you can see," was B's response after a moment. We followed our well-worn path from our parking spot, down a hill of trees to the small metal and wood dock that offered us a stairway into the water. From here, we enter the water to Riverwalk about 20 yards downstream. But before I did this time, I could see someone in our favorite part of our spot. It took me a minute to realize what was making the hairs stand up on my neck. "Is he standing on top of the water?" I asked quietly, almost a whisper. They looked at each other, then at me. This time the answer came from D. "We think he must be standing on a rock." Maybe. It is possible that a large rock would be moved by the river to a new location. Hell, the reason we have to stand in the water is because of bank erosion, and it had been a year almost since the last time I'd been here. Still, something was off. "All right," I said. "Let's go meet our mystery guest." I waded down into the river and made my way slowly downstream until I was about 10 or 12 feet from the gentleman. My friends took up spots upstream from me at distances of about 8 and 15 feet. He hadn't seemed to notice me yet, so I took a moment to look him over as he continued to flip his line upstream, drag it across the bottom as it worked downstream, then flip it back upstream. This is how you catch sockeye, which like to swim on the bottom of the river. Mouths open to filter food. Well, I thought to myself, at least he knows what he's doing. He was stocky and short, more muscular than portly. I'd say he was just under 5 feet tall. Hard to tell when you are half submerged in a river and the subject you're looking at seems to be standing on water. As I looked to his feet, I noticed he seemed to be wearing skin-tight, leathery, two-toed boots. The water only covered the top of these boots. I could also clearly see he was not standing on a rock. The only thing he seemed to be standing on was the river itself. I think my subconscious knew what I was dealing with long before the rest of me. Suddenly, things from a barely remembered class 15 years ago were on the forefront of my mind. I have never spoken Japanese as fluently as I did this day. I nervously greeted him. "Good afternoon. Are you doing well?" This got his attention. As he turned his head, his face shimmered a bit, and I saw what looked like the beak of a large turtle. Then it was back to a friendly, smiling human face underneath a fishing hat. Delightful. I hadn't expected to meet anyone who speaks my tongue. I can only manage a little. "Do you speak English?" I asked. His eyes met mine, and I felt lost in them for a moment. 2 golden orbs where iris and pupils were supposed to be. Then he thought a moment and answered in perfect English. "Yes, I learn things quickly." I gave him my name. He nodded and replied, "I am Mizushi." I carefully continued my questioning. "Are you separated from your group? Can we help you find them?" "No, thank you. I have no group. I am traveling alone." The flip of lines on water for a moment. I had more questions. "What brings you here?" Mizushi stopped casting a moment, looking off to the distance. "I was away from home when the disaster came to Fukushima Prefecture. I lost everything. Now I'm looking for a new home with less painful memories." As much as Mizushi gave me the screaming memes, I felt sorry for him. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," he said. Flip, splash, flip, splash. Eventually I noticed it had been a while and none of us had had even a single bite, which according to the numbers posted that mooring from a sonar counter downriver should be impossible for my friends at least. These boys could catch a fish out of a barrel of water and nothing else. Then I thought a bit more. In the hour or so that we had been there, I had lost a hook to a snag in the river. D and B had both lost 2 to fish, breaking their line. Another thing that was making me suspicious. These 2 have been tying these knots all their life. Mine breaking was almost normal as I'm not as good with my knots, less experienced. I mention these line breaks because the 3 of us have a rule about it. If your line breaks 3 times, get off the river and go get the other's beer. It's a good rule for 2 reasons. D and B, and honestly myself, are highly competitive, so the break cools the frustrations of the person with the bad luck. Getting the person's bad luck away from the fishing is the second reason. I knew at this point someone would be running into town soon. My brain saw it as a way to get one of my friends out of danger and I slowed my casts. Sure enough, a little bit longer and I heard not 1, but 2 lines snap at the same time. "Son of a bitch." I heard from D at the same moment B let out a "Motherfucker!" I hadn't expected that, but I took the opportunity. You guys both know the rule. I'd like the beer to be Alaskan Amber this time, please. They were obviously nervous leaving me alone with Mizushi, even though by this time I think they just thought he was odd. "You heard me, gentlemen. Now get your bad juju out of the water, please. I'm trying to fish." I think they could tell by the way I was talking to them that I was, in my mind, screaming for them to get out of here. Their lives depended on it. They both gathered their stuff and got out of the water. A moment later, they shouted back in a bit, and were gone up the path. As quickly as they were gone, I realized I no longer wanted to be in the water alone with Mizushi. My mind raced to find an excuse and soon found one. I've got some snacks in my bag up there on the dock. Would you like a snack? He turned and locked eyes with me. I would love to eat. My mind filled with all the terrifying things that could mean. I eased my way back upstream to the dock and its stairs. Mizushi was already standing by my pack when I got to the top of them. I bent down and grabbed my pack, and several of the veggies my mother had set on top of its contents fell out as I stood up. He was staring at them, as if they were something he needed more than whatever intentions he had on me. Are those cucumbers? Hesitantly, I nodded. Would you like them? Picked fresh this morning. His eyebrow rose. Really? I would love them. They are my favorite snack. With this statement, a piece of information in the back of my head come to the front. I was certain what kind of creature I was dealing with now. I praised whatever luck had made me help my mother that morning. Because I arrived at a plan, I pretended to have trouble with my gear and pack. I was waiting for an opening for my plan. Go ahead and grab them, I'm stuck on something here. He crouched down to pick them up, eating one quickly. He stood, the others being gobbled down. That was wonderful, thank you. It was the opening I was looking for. You honor my mother's garden skills, I said, bowing deeply, as my long-ago teacher had taught me to bow to someone with more power than myself. It was a lame try, and if he was still hungry, he could have easily smashed my skull in then. But it worked. As if instinctually, Mizushi returned my bow, trying to bow as deep as I had. In his effort, his hat fell off, revealing a small, bald indent on the top of his head. A small amount of greasy water poured out of it onto the ground, and a spine-shaking scream came from Mizushi's throat. However he had maintained his disguise, it fell away now without his power. I would describe the creature now standing before me as a bipedal turtle or tortoise, about 4 feet tall. Rough green and brown skin showed where shell didn't cover. His face was still human-like, with greasy black hair surrounding his bowl. A turtle's beak had replaced his mouth. He stood frozen by the sudden loss of his power. Please, he pleaded, his voice taking a tone of fear. Please, you must refill my bowl or I will die. I do not know how someone of this land learned this, but you must be wise enough to know that is the truth. As someone who was pretty sure he had about to be eaten, I didn't immediately feel pity for this creature, especially one I knew was still trying to have one over on me. I know enough about your kind, Kappa. Finally saying it out loud seemed strange, but I knew that's what Mizushi was now. I know enough that you are telling the truth in this regard, but also leaving something out. It sighed. You are correct. Refilling my bowl, saving my wretched life, will make me beholden to you as my people's honor demands. I thought for a moment. To him it must have seemed I was deciding whether or not to just let him die. In actuality, I was berating myself for not remembering that. The idea of a spirit being essentially my slave didn't sit right to me. The idea of any being a slave to another bothers me. I walked to the river as I mulled this over. I took an empty water bottle from my pack and filled it. I returned and squatted down eye level with the beast. I have no desire to rule others, nor do I wish to harm them even when they intended to harm me. He broke eye contact for a moment, knowing I knew what he had intended. I will spare you, as I was truthful earlier about feeling sorrow at the loss of your home. If you choose to live in this river, you must never harm a human, be they man, woman, or child, if I suspect for a moment that you have anything to do with a person's disappearance. I will call your name from this shore until you come, as you must. Then I will command you to take your own life. Do you understand? Beaten, the creature gave me a nod and a yes. I filled his skull bowl. Go, don't make me regret my kindness. Almost before I could finish the command, there were ripples on the surface of the river, and Mizushi was gone. I decided this was a good time to leave. As I approached my truck and started to get ready to leave, D and B returned in the Suburban. You know what, guys? I just don't feel like fishing right now. How about we go find a bar? I told them. Even given what little of today's weirdness they had actually experienced, they were quick to agree a pitcher of beer served by a cute waitress sounded a lot better. After the second or third round, one of them asked me, what was up with that Japanese guy today? So I told them about the creature I'd seen, how close to a watery death all three of us had been that day. They laughed, ordered another pitcher, and said I always told the best stories. Even with what they saw, they still didn't believe me, no matter. Every season when we go fishing, I sneak a cucumber into the river when they aren't looking. And every season, I catch the most fish. Edit. Already some are asking for more. There are some I just can't share with outsiders, but I will ask some of my more willing friends if I can share theirs. Also, I've been asked to share my first experience. Maybe after a bit I'll be able to find the words for that. I have been a woodsman my whole life. Growing up in the state of Alaska, I've spent a great amount of time in the wilderness. Countless days tracking down massive bears, moose, and caribou. Weeks at a time mushing sled dogs across frozen rivers, and being a guide on the most difficult hunts taught me survival skills that most of my colleagues will only dream of, which is why I have made my living off the land on a remote homestead in the Mat-Su Valley south of Denali National Park. Being considered one of the best hunter-trackers in a land full of them is what brought me to the attention of the FBI when they needed a very dangerous animal found and killed. It was a cold winter day when I first met Special Agent Jones. I was just done feeding my huskies there a usual mix of hot water, salmon, and the best commercial dog food you can get. Trudging along towards my modest little log cabin to warm my cold body, I heard the whining of a snowmobile engine coming up the trail. It was unusual to hear a snowmobile on a Tuesday with the weekenders gone home for the time being. So patiently waiting for it to continue west toward town, it suddenly turned north, towards me. 10 minutes later, a smaller man wearing a Fish and Game winter jacket on a newer trail model pulling into my yard. The dogs, hearing a strange machine pull into the yard, began barking and howling with glee. The man was clearly quite cold as he quickly killed the two-stroke engine and walked up to me. He pulled off his glove and stuck out his hand. I quickly took his hand and greeted the man. "Special Agent Jones," he said. I looked at the man and seen instantly he was out of his element. Cold hands, red nose, and the constant shivers told me everything, so I said to this ill-prepared man, "Come on inside, Agent Jones, it's mighty cold out here." Once inside and seated with a cup of coffee, I finally asked, "What would an FBI agent want with a bush rat like myself?" The man straightened himself and said, "The FBI would like to employ your services as a tracker, sir." Huh. Well, I guess I was good at what I do, but I wasn't expecting this. I see. And what exactly do you want me to track? I asked. Well, he stuttered. We're not exactly sure. Not sure, huh? I said, puzzled. He explained what happened. A couple of teenagers were found on the Old Pearl River, one with their skull smashed open and one with his chest crushed. No scratches, bites, anything on them, I asked. In bewilderment. Not one, he said. And where the hell is the Old Pearl River at? He looked at me goofy and said, Louisiana. I've never been before, I said, and I don't think I would do much good to you down there. But you will, he assured. We have been searching for the best woodsman in the country and we found you, he said confidently. I'll be damned if I flew my happy ass up here and froze my balls off on that snowmobile to go all the way back down south and settle for second best, he quipped. Well then, you got yourself a hunter then, I answered. That is how I found myself alongside the Old Pearl River, waist deep in the swamp water, sitting next to a swamp man named Shelby. Shelby was an alligator hunter that was hired for the use of his knowledge of the area and, more importantly, his airboat. You boys got anything yet? Said Jake. Jake was a Marine Scout sniper until he was very recently recruited to be on this task force. Sorry, Jake. Not shit, I told the sniper. Well, let's pull out for the night. I'm freezing out here and my feet are wet, Jones whined. Fine, was all I said in return. Jones was clearly more of a desk jockey than a field guy, but this was his team and he was determined to be with us every step of the way. Let's get going then, Shelby whispered. We quietly crept back to the airboat. You're back, said Sarah. Sarah is a cryptozoologist and Agent Jones said she could be of some help. Yeah, we are back, only been gone 6 hours, I retorted. Ignoring my sarcasm, she said, I've been doing some research and I think I know what we're dealing with. Doubling down on my sarcasm. What, you don't believe what Jones told the public? You know, a bear that crushes people instead of chewing them up. She grinned and proudly stated, Nope, not even a little. Shelby fired up the boat, went and picked up Jones and Jake, and we all decided to regroup in the morning. Swamp ape, huh? Jake sneered. Sarah glared at him through her sunglasses and eye spook. Sure as shit wasn't a bear, Jake. You saw the bodies. Yeah, that wasn't no black bear, was the short, athletic man's only reply. How do we kill it? Shelby asked. We don't, answered Sarah while staring at me. We trap it, she stated. Right then Jones got a call and went outside. How in the hell you gonna trap an 800-pound pissed-off swamp monster? Jake intelligently asked. To trap an animal, you must know the animal, what it eats, how it walks, how intelligent it is, the way it thinks, among other things, I informed. Shelby then stated the obvious. So back to square one, find the damn thing. Just then Jones came back to the table. We gotta go right now, he ordered. I'll explain on the way. Fucking Jake cursed as we pulled up to the scene. 8 pigs dead, 5 smashed skulls, and 3 ripped throats. We got out of Shelby's old Ford truck and quickly investigated the scene. They all were killed maybe 3 hours ago and large. 3 toed tracks with webbed feet were heading towards the swamp. I told Jones that I should start tracking now and the others should go get Shelby's boat. I can't send someone out there alone. I'll go with you, he said. No, you can't. Someone has to stay and deal with the farmer and the press when they hear about this, I explained. Jake, what about you? Jones questioned. I left my M40 at my room, Jake confessed. What about me? Sarah asked. You ain't got no gun, though, said Shelby. I'll borrow your pistol, Sarah replied. Fine with me, I guess, I approved. Jones simply nodded and Shelby handed her his old 1911. I already had my .45 Colt on my hip, so I pulled my Marlin 4570 out of Shelby's truck and off into the swamp we went. For 7 hours we tracked the beast through the swamp. It was clearly quite intelligent as it made almost no tracks as it moved through the forest, thus making my task very difficult. Finally, as we crept through the swamp, we heard a noise just ahead. I quickly motioned for Sarah to stay still. Then I saw the monster. It stood approximately 8 tall and roughly 400 lay-bees. The monster's arms had to be at least 5 long, and the thing was covered in a reddish-brown fur. Almost the instant I saw the creature, I smelled it. I had the horrible stench of rotten milk and wet dog. But the thing that seemed the strangest to me was its eyes, red and menacing with a slight glow to them. I put the lever gun against my shoulder and took aim. Sarah squeezed my right arm slightly. Please don't, she asked. I locked eyes with her and lowered my weapon with a slight sigh. The monster let out a deep, loud howl and continued into the swamp. That night I laid in my shitty motel bed and thought about why I didn't shoot the monster. I mean, I had a clear shot. Even if I told Jones that I didn't and a .45-70, I could have dropped it before it knew what hit him. I arrived at the conclusion that I didn't take that shot because Sarah had asked me not to. Sarah, she was that kind of person. This whole time she had been trying to capture it, not kill. Needless to say, after that night I was much more interested in my newfound profession and my new partner. Perfect, said Jones. Hell yeah, Jake agreed. So he walks in, hits the tripwire, and the gate falls and he can't get out? Sarah confirmed. Yep, was my reply. Earlier that morning I had designed a cage trap for our prey. Okay. Shelby, take Jake into the swamp and find a good spot for this thing. I and you will go into town and get someone to start building this thing, Jones stated. What about me? Asked Sarah. Find out as much as you can about our little friend and we'll meet up when I and Jones are done. Jones simply nodded in agreement with my statement. I couldn't find much out on our buddy, but from what I did find, it seems he's a swamp Bigfoot. But meaner and with some serious BO, Sarah said as she sat down next to me. She had decided to get a nicer hotel suite, so she wanted to meet here. In my experience, meaner is really more territorial. I softly corrected it. Either way, at least I'll have you there, she said with a smirk. I'll protect you, I said, and with a laugh. I don't need your protection, I just know I can run faster than you. She confessed with a laugh. I grinned and looked at the clock. I better get going, I told her. I'll show you the door, she offered. After stepping to the other side of the doorway, I turned to say goodnight. She softly grabbed my hand and said, thank you. For the other night, you know, not shooting. Not a problem. You're welcome, I replied. Good night. She said, good night, Sarah. You really think it's gonna work? Sarah asked quietly. It will, was all I said in return. The plan was simple. We had figured out he is like a bear, in that he likes his food rotten. It was seen digging up those pig carcasses and carrying one back into the swamp. So we dug up the rest and are using them as bait. After about 5 hours of waiting, the beast finally showed itself, slowly sulking out of the swamp, about 25 yards directly in front of Sarah and me. "Eyes on," I whispered into the radio to Jake and Jones on the opposite side of the trap. The beast rose up and sniffed the air, looking for danger. A slight snap came from my right side. I looked to see Sarah had tripped, and she was now scared shitless. Turning my eyes back to the best, I found those big red eyes were locked on me. As soon as we locked eyes, it charged. I had an idea that I prayed would work. I motioned Sarah to stay down and started running towards the trap 25 away. I heard chasing after me, but it was gaining fast. I got directly in front of the trap door. I whirled around to see it had caught up. He leaped towards me, but I dodged him. He spun around to face me, and with his back now to the door, his face was met with the butt of my rifle. He fell backward into the trap, triggering it. The iron gate dropped, locking him inside. The beast let out a roar, a hell of an angry roar that sent shivers down my back. "Holy shit," Jake exclaimed, now at my side. "Yay," I said back, "holy shit." The FBI was finishing loading the beast into a truck when Jones approached me. "What did you think of the team?" he asked. My gaze shifted towards Sarah as she was talking to some agent about the beast. "I liked everybody," I answered. Jones, catching my gaze, said with a smirk. "Some more than others?" My grin was my only reply. "Would you be interested in doing hunts like this one again?" "Everyone else already agreed," he asked in a more serious tone. I thought for a moment and then said, "Yeah, I'll hunt with you folks anytime." I pulled into the little mountain town at about 10:30 a.m. I looked at the thermostat on the dash of the new Dodge. It read a bone-chilling 24 below. I pulled into the nearly abandoned campground and found the 5 Arctic-grade tents that I recommended for this hunt. Me, Shelby, Jake, and Sarah would all get one of the 4 smaller, private tents to ourselves, while Agent Jones would stay in the larger tent that would double as a headquarters and cafeteria for this hunt. I unloaded the 40 Huskies out of the custom-built dog box on the back of the Dodge and set up a lean-to structure that would serve as their house for the next couple of weeks. I then made my way to the HQ tent and checked the fire burning in the wood-burning stove. It was nearly out. I mentally questioned my team's basic winter survival abilities while I patiently built a roaring fire to warm the tent. I was enjoying the warmth of the fire when I heard the black SUV pull into the campsite. "Whoa, nice ride," Jake commented on the new truck. "I thought you drove an old Ford," Sarah questioned. "I did," I replied while looking sharply at Jones. Jake, putting 2 and 2 together, jokingly questioned, "You bought him a truck? Where's my bonus?" Jones, always serious, answered, We needed dogs, and do you know another musher with a security clearance?" Shelby then broke into our conversation. "Come on, the pizza is getting cold." We went inside and ate. Then Jones broke the small talk. We all knew why we were here, but Jones finally explained in detail what happened. Turns out that a group of 5 snowmobilers went into the backcountry for a weekend trip. They were found dead the following Tuesday, or I should say, what was left of them was found dead. The bodies were severely mutilated, eaten by some strange beast. The bodies were found in their campsite, which had been completely trashed by whatever had done this. All 5 snowmobiles were found at the campsite unharmed in operating condition, meaning that whatever happened, it happened so fast that they couldn't run to their machines to escape. There were no tracks found due to high wind having blown away the tracks. The locals had removed the bodies but had not disturbed anything else, so we decided to head to the crime scene early the next morning to assess the situation properly. At daybreak, I hitched teams of dogs to the 4 dog sleds I had brought with me, 2 racing-style sleds to be used to move quickly if needed, nicknamed the Corvette sleds by Jake, a large freighting-style sled for moving bulk gear, the trucker sled, and a multi-passenger touring-style sled, the station wagon. I gave everyone a crash course in dog mushing and assigned everyone a sled. I was to lead the way on a Corvette sled, followed by Jake on the trucker sled, then Jones and Shelby on the station wagon, then Sarah in the rear on a Corvette sled. The trip was pure hell for me. Jake complained constantly about not getting a Corvette sled, and Jones couldn't keep from falling off. Shelby grumbled nonstop about the cold. In fact, the only person who seemingly enjoyed the trip was Sarah, who learned the difficult task of steering the sled with ease. Never once complaining, she was pretty impressive for a rookie musher, and I'm not easily impressed. We arrived at the murder scene after a couple of hours. They had picked a good spot for a camp. surrounded on three sides by trees but still in the heart of the mountains. Perfect riding country. I quickly surveyed the small campsite. There were 3 small Arctic-grade tents equipped with small propane heaters for warmth. Apparently, the victims had been a group of 2 women and 3 men. The tents were collapsed from the snowstorm on the night of the murder. But upon entering the last semi-standing tent, I found about a dozen beer cans scattered on the floor of the tent, with another 12-pack in the corner. I kicked around in the snow and found the remains of a campfire. It had burned to nothing but ashes, telling me it had burned out on its own and was not put out, so the campers must have been awake at the start of the attack. Jones approached me. "What do you think happened?" Whatever it was hit so hard and fast that they couldn't even get to their snowmobiles, and it didn't help that these folks were probably drunk. Sitting around the campfire not paying attention. After a brief silence, Jones spoke up. "I got a couple of things to fill out here, and I want to take some pictures of the scene." I thought of the best thing to do and responded, "I'm going to go search around over there in the trees. The wind wouldn't have hit them so badly and maybe I could find some tracks." The group of trees was roughly 1,000 yards up the mountain to the north, further away from the town in the valley below, the most likely spot for an animal to retreat to. Jones looked at the trees and replied, "Them trees look a good distance away. Take your radio in, Jake." I nodded in agreement and found Jake sitting on one of the dog sleds. "Hey, Jake, you want to take a look up there in that group of trees," I said, motioning to the said trees. He slowly rose from his seat, glanced up at the trees up ahead and said, "Sure, I guess. You got your rifle?" I casually asked. "Nah, I left it back in my tent," he answered. "Got a sidearm?" I questioned, hoping he wouldn't have been foolish as to come to the backcountry unarmed. "Yeah, I got my Glock," he answered. "Oh, okay. Do you carry a 40 S&W or 45 ACP? I curiously replied, slightly relieved. "Knox 19mm Parabellum, what about you?" he asked. "What the hell you gonna do with a 9mm? I asked, quite aggravated. "What do you mean?" he asked, completely bewildered. "I mean, we're not fighting people. Whatever we are out here hunting ripped 3 people apart before any one of them could do a damn thing about it. You think you're gonna put what did that down with something that takes multiple shots to kill a person?" I stated, now quite angry at his ignorance. He returned my anger in kind. "Go to hell, Josh. Who the hell do you think you are? I'll carry what I damn well please. You like to walk around like you're in charge or something, but hear me now. You ain't my superior." For a moment I considered knocking his teeth out for his ignorance and attitude, but before I could act, Jones stepped between us. "Settle down, you two," he said angrily. "I didn't make this team fight against ourselves, damn it," he shouted, pausing for a moment, then continuing. "Shelby, why don't you go with Josh?" "Fuck that, I'll go, damn it," Jake responded. Jones looked at me for confirmation. I just nodded once. "Jake, go ahead and jump on Sarah's Corvette sled. The snow is hard on top but icy. We'll have to put booties on the dogs to protect their feet," I directed Jake. He nodded once in confirmation. I quickly put the booties on the dogs and looked up to see Jake on the runners of his sled, and off we went. We arrived at the tree line and quickly anchored off the dogs. I walked over to help Jake and seen a small speck of blood on one of his leader's paw, also noticing that one of her booties was missing. "God damn it," I said with clear aggravation. "What?" Jake asked. Upon closer inspection, I found he had put several booties on wrong so that they could easily fall off. "You put the damn booties on wrong," I answered. "Excuse me," Jake said sarcastically. I shook my head and replied, "I think, I'll fix it, would have worked better." "Kiss my ass," was his reply. I started to head into the woods and he soon started to follow. We searched for a couple of hours in an uneasy silence, until I found a track. "Hey, come here," I motioned for Jake. "What in God's name is that from?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. The track was about 2 foot long and 1 foot wide, with long toes ending with 6-inch long claws. They were fresher than they should have been. "They're heading north," I said, "but I want to see where they came from, follow the tracks backwards to find out." I told Jake. "Sure," he answered. "And take my rifle. Wouldn't want this thing to shove that 9mm up your ass." I mocked. "Ha ha, fucking funny," he replied, obviously annoyed. I began following the tracks northward, chuckling lightly to myself. What kind of fool would come up here with a damn pea shooter? Jake didn't strike me as an idiot, but now I found myself questioning my teammate. Even if he carried a small pistol and an adequate rifle, he would at least be able to walk safely. But no, the dumbass left his rifle at camp. So now I'm left with nothing but my .45 Colt. While adequate, it lacked the range and sheer knockdown power of my .45-70. My internal rant was interrupted by the slightest movement out of the corner of my eye. I quickly spun towards it, crouched, and focused my sight on it. The beast was climbing up a steep bluff 250 yards to my 10-0 clock. It was too far to accurately tell, but it looked to be at least 10 or 14 feet tall. With what looked like 3-foot antlers growing from its head, it finally reached a small ledge and stood, looking on the valley below him. I slowly pulled my pistol from its holster, knowing it would be useless at this range, but the familiar weight in my hand was reassuring. The beast luckily did not see me, and turned and ducked into a low cave. I quickly made my way back down the mountain with extra caution. Finally, I made my way to the 2 parked dog teams, where Jake was waiting for me. "Where the hell have you been?" he questioned, handing back my rifle. "I saw it," I replied. "Seen what?" he asked with curiosity. "To hell if I know," I replied. We quickly readied the dogs and made our way to the ruined campsite where everyone had been waiting. On our arrival, Jones started questioning. "You two get lost?" "No, we found something," I replied. "Found what?" He asked. "Tracks coming from that ridge," Jake answered, pointing to a tall bluff about a mile to the west. "Fresh, only about an hour or 2 old," I added. "My guess is you followed them," Jones asked me. "Yeah, I followed them," I answered. "What did you find?" he asked again. "I don't really know," I answered. He nodded quickly. "Sarah," he yelled. I quickly described the creature to Sarah while we packed our gear to go, answering any and all questions she had. Then we quickly returned to our campsite. I started a fire in Jones's tent. No one else could. While Sarah started to research what I had seen, I decided to ask Jake more about what he saw. "Hey Jake, you mentioned that you followed the tracks that lead to that ridge. What can you tell me about them?" I asked. "Yeah, them tracks led right to that ridge and, well, it looked to me like it was watching," he answered. "Watching us, huh? It must be pretty smart," I stated. "Wonder why, though?" Jake asked no one in particular. "When wolves return to a kill, they'll sit back and watch before they'll come back in on the carcass to make sure that nothing has disturbed it. If they see something wrong, they leave it alone, too risky for them," I answered. "Yeah, if this thing is anything, it's smart," Sarah commented as she re-entered the tent. "What do you have on it?" I questioned. "It's pretty scary. From what you described to me, I think it's what they call a Wendigo," Sarah answered. "What's a Wendigo?" Jones asked. "I have heard a little from some of the native guides. They say a Wendigo is like a spirit of forest or something. They say that a Wendigo represents the evil of cannibalism, that if a person eats another, they become a Wendigo. They say that a Wendigo can drive a man mad and then possess him, making him crave human flesh. Wendigo often can represent extreme hunger, cold, and any sort of evil, really. But I was always told it was just a legend," I informed the group. "But our buddy didn't possess anyone. And nobody ate no one, so that doesn't cover it," Shelby pointed out. "Science tells us that most legends are really just exaggerated versions of the truth," Sarah said. "From what I've learned about them is that they are a lot like the Yeti, but a thinner, taller version," she added. "So, Bigfoot's Eskimo cousin?" Jake asked assuredly. "Pretty much," Sarah confirmed. "So how do we trap it?" Jones asked. "It's a cave-dwelling creature, so the thing to do is wait until it leaves its cave, set your trap in the cave, and simply wait until it returns." "One problem, though," I stated. "What is it?" asked Jones. "That cave trap method, it works with a bear or wolf when they leave to go hunting, but this thing leaves to hunt people," I answered. "We'll close the whole area to people. Blame avalanche danger or something," said Jones. "Josh, draw up some design for a trap. I'll have a local start building it immediately. Then I need you to head out into the backcountry and tell everyone to go home. I don't need anyone else getting killed. Take someone with you." He issued me the order and I simply nodded my head and went to work. It was a good plan. I drew up an easy design for a large cage trap and sent Jones on his way. I thought about who to take and quickly decided on Sarah, as she was the best musher of our team, making for a much quicker trip. "Sarah, you busy?" I asked. "No, not really, why?" she answered. I need someone that can actually ride a sled to help me evacuate the area. I was wondering if you would come. I said. Sure, let me grab my gear, she said. She went into her tent, then re-emerged a few minutes later with her winter gear and a pistol on her hip. What are you carrying? I asked. Oh, just my dad's old .357 mag, she answered nonchalantly. I smirked to myself as we were heading out, knowing Jake would be embarrassed to know that even inexperienced Sarah knew to carry a large pistol. We searched the surrounding Maine countryside. We found a few different groups of snowmobilers and sent them home. Some gave trouble, but no one argued once I showed them my FBI badge Jones supplied me. Things took a drastic turn when we were on our way back to camp. We were mushing along a trail that ran on top of a steep bluff that sloped down into a heavily forested valley, and eventually, a frozen river. That is where we saw it. The beast was following the river north, the opposite way we were traveling. I stopped the team and anchored the still fresh dogs off to a nearby tree, quietly instructing Sarah to do the same. Do you see it? She whispered. Yeah, I responded, pointing at it through the various trees. I retrieved my rifle and my binoculars from my sled bag to try to get a better view. As I said, the creature was heading north along the river, so I figured that it was probably leaving its den. As its den was located to the southwest of our position, it was probably hungry and looking for food. I couldn't find it. You got your phone? I asked. Yeah, she answered. Call Jake and Shelby, tell them to haul ass out here, I commanded. What about Jones? Sarah asked. Call him after Jake, I answered. What are you gonna do? She asked. This thing is killing and eating people. I've got no choice, I answered. She shook her head slightly in approval, although I knew she was disappointed. I know, she sighed. I quickly found the creature in the valley below, still oblivious to our presence. The wind was coming from the northwest, definitely in my favor. I strapped on my snowshoes and began descending down the cliff. I made my way down along the river and silently started north. When I last saw the beast, it was a little over a mile ahead of me, but because the snow was deep, it was moving slowly, much slower than me with my snowshoes. It took me over an hour, and it was almost dark when I found it. It had stopped at an unfrozen spot of the river to get a drink when I spotted it, so I silently laid on the ground and slowly crawled through the snow, its cold stinging my face, to a nearby ice-covered log. I steadied my rifle on the log, taking aim, then slowly cocking the rifle's hammer with a metallic click. The beast must have heard the click because it suddenly turned and stood just as I fired. The bullet hit the animal in the upper hip, knocking it to the ground on its stomach. The creature let out a pained howl as it struggled fruitlessly to get to its feet. I rose from my shooting position and approached the beast, intending to put the damn thing out of its misery. Just as I shouldered the rifle and worked its lever action, I heard Sarah scream. Wait, she yelled. I turned and looked down the river to see Jake and Sarah about 100 yards away, approaching quickly on the station wagon. They pulled up beside me and stopped the sled. Tranq darts, Jake said, holding up an air-powered dart gun. He walked over and shot the animal with one, and within a couple minutes it was out like a light. Do you think it will live? Jake asked. It should. I shot it in the hip, I answered. Yeah, about that, Jake said, smirking. It moved at the last second, I explained. Uh-huh, Jake answered, still smirking. At least I brought my rifle, I retorted with my own smirk. Okay, fine, Jake said, chuckling slightly. How are we going to get this thing out of here? I wondered out loud. Jones is on his way with a helicopter and some agents. They'll take it from here, Sarah answered. 2 hours later, I was helping to load the still sleeping cryptid in the back of a semi-truck to be hauled up to, who knows. After we finished up, Jones approached me. You did another excellent job here, Josh, he complimented. Just doing my job, I answered. So can I count on you for more hunts in the future? He asked. Of course, any time, I answered.